This is Letter from America. Today's topic is impoverished and neglected rural Zimbabwe is waking up against the Dhiziri paChinhoyi gang. For many years, ZANU-PF has claimed that rural areas in Zimbabwe have its strongest political support in the country. ZANU-PF has consistently won rural constituencies to the extent of declaring some areas like Mashonaland East and West no-go areas for the opposition parties. MDC-T under Tsvangirai, MDC Alliance under Chamisa, and now CCC under Chamisa have had a very difficult time campaigning in rural areas. Several CCC rallies in rural areas have been banned by the police or viciously disrupted. Where CCC has gone ahead with their rallies, supporters were dispersed by riot police using water tanks and tear gas. ZANU-PF thugs, in some cases supported by riot police, have blocked MDC and CCC members from going to rural areas. In one situation, a hired thug fired a gun at Chamisa's car, narrowly missing him. The story and the pictures spread through the social media like wildfire. The diaspora raised $120,000 to buy Chamisa a bulletproof car. But just how much support does ZANU-PF enjoy in rural areas? If, as ZANU-PF party claims, it enjoys widespread support among the rural population, why is the Dhiziri paChinhoyi ZANU-PF blocking other parties, notably CCC, from campaigning in rural areas? Recent developments and trends show that ZANU-PF has always exaggerated its support in rural areas. There is a rising resentment among rural people against ZANU-PF, as shown by a number of events. If there is one compelling reason why rural people have never liked or supported ZANU-PF, strange as it might sound, the reason is that rural people have been abandoned by ZANU-PF. It is very hard to pinpoint any major and significant rural infrastructure developed by ZANU-PF since independence some 42 years ago. According to the World Bank figures, the rural population in Zimbabwe was reported at 67.76% in 2020. Rural areas generally have poor economic and social outcomes, where the challenges of food insecurity, poverty, gender and income inequalities, and the lack of employment opportunities are accentuated. According to a report by the International Labour Organization, or ILO, rural areas generally have poor economic and social outcomes, where the challenges of food insecurity, poverty, gender and income inequalities, and the lack of employment opportunities are great, are accentuated, just like the World Bank report. These challenges reinforce each other in a vicious cycle of eroding human capital and decreasing labor productivity, thereby perpetuating poverty and social inequalities across generations in rural Zimbabwe. Rural areas are also generally more exposed to the effects of climate change, especially as agriculture is often the mainstay of this economy and its productivity is also highly dependent on the weather and seasonal patterns. Access to services and productive infrastructure is also a major challenge to unleash the productive potential of the rural economy. Rural people are now beginning to wake up from apathy and starting to ask ZANU-PF, why should we vote for you? What have you done for us? 3 years ago, a meeting between rural people in Uzumba Marangwe Pfungwe and ZANU-PF officials revealed the deep resentment held by rural people against ZANU-PF. Uzumba Maramba Pfungwe, or UMP, is considered, according to ZANU propaganda, a stronghold for ZANU-PF. MDC and Triple C politicians who tried to venture in this area were harassed and blocked by hired ZANU-PF thugs. They abandoned their campaign program for that area. Just to add to the decadence of the Dhiziri paChinhoyi outfit, not long ago, rural people in Uzumba Pfungwe Maramba area met with ZANU-PF top officials to complain that the Chinese were engaged in mining operations on their land and they were being forced by local ZANU-PF and the Chinese to relocate. The angry villagers wanted to know why they were losing their land to the Chinese. They threatened they would never vote for ZANU-PF in future elections. ZANU-PF officials arrived proudly in a convoy of cars. Their leader said they were there to hear people's complaints and concerns. Then the rural people asked these officials this question: why are you giving our land to the Chinese? Why are you moving us from our land? The official responded first by chanting a slogan, Pamberide ZANU-PF, Pamberide kubatana, pasine mandu. The villagers gave a lukewarm response. Next, this official proceeded to tell about ZANU-PF, about how ZANU-PF had liberated the country. One villager said, tinozviziva zvamataura, munogara muchizvitaura. Tinokumbira kuti mupindure mubvunzo wamabvunzwa. We know very well what you've just said. You always say it. What we are asking here is for you to answer the question that you have been asked. And the question is, why are you giving our land to the Chinese? Why are you forcibly relocating us? The official cleared his throat, rambled on again about how the president had said he would listen to the voice of the people because they were the voice of God. After being reminded again to answer the question, This official said, nyaya iyi inoda ma-officials eku-ministry wari pano. Hawasi pano, tichawataurira. Muchazopiwa minduro. Your question requires the officials from the relevant ministry to answer. We will pass on that question to them and you will be given a response. Rini tawane mwedzi tichibvunza asi hapana apindura, said another villager. When are we going to get this response? It's now months that we've been asking this question, but nobody has responded. And that was the end of the meeting. And as the officials drove away in their impressive convoys of cars, escorted by the police, it was clear to the people of Uzumba, Maramba, Fungwe that ZANU-PF is a dead party. It has no message for them, and the people of Uzumbe, Maramba, Fungwe know exactly what they will do come the 2023 election. And this is why ZANU-PF is panicking. In another situation, a leaked transcript of a conversation among top ZANU-PF officials revealed that ZANU-PF is now acutely aware that it has lost support from the rural population. Just as in the Uzumba Maramba Pfungwe meeting, ZANU-PF cannot explain to the rural people why they should vote for them. They cannot answer a simple question: what have you done for us? Since independence 42 years ago. The following leaked transcript could not be independently verified, but an analysis of its text and subject matter falls well in line with what ZANU-PF officials have been saying both in private and in public. The leaked transcript shows a discussion that is reported to have taken place in the ZANU-PF headquarters between former Finance Minister Patrick Chinamasa, ZANU-PF spokesman Chris Mutsvangwa, ZANU Director of Information Tafadzwa Mugwadi, and Defense Minister Opa Muchinguri. Again, to repeat, this transcript has not been independently verified, but its text, its content, its substance reflects what everybody knows about what ZANU-PF is talking about. By the way, Chinamasa is infamous or famous, take your pick, for officially opening a trash bin in Chitungwiza when he was finance minister. He came in a chauffeur-driven government vehicle to open the trash bin. Just for your own information. In the leaked conversation, Chinamasa and Mugwadi agree that ZANU-PF must drill more boreholes in rural areas. But Mutsvangwa disagrees. He says they should dig in boreholes in urban areas because, according to him, that is where ZANU-PF needs to attract more votes. When Mugwadi says Chinamasa is right, Mutsvangwa cuts him off by saying, "What do you know about the liberation war? We must win votes in urban areas if we are to win the 2023 election. If we do not win urban votes, we are finished." That is Mutsvangwa saying that. Mugwadi responds, "We hear our supporters have now deserted us. They are with Mukomana," referring to Chamisa. Here are two top ZANU-PF officials talking about the possibility of losing the 2023 election and admitting that they have been abandoned, they have been deserted by Zimbabweans, and that Zimbabweans' preference to lead the country is Mukomana, referring to Chamisa. Chinamasa agrees with Mugwadi and then says, "Did you see what happened in Binga when Mukomana arrived? Our own CIO report says all houses in Binga were empty, deserted waenda kumukomana, or after the people had gone to meet Chamisa." Then Muchinguri enters and says, "Tell me, Kuti, what have we done for rural areas for them to vote for us in 2023? There are no roads, mombe dzavo dzakafa, their cattle are dying because there is no dipping chemicals. Zvikoro zvakavakiwa naSmith, which are standard. Schools were built by Ian Smith and are now substandard. Maclinic hadzina mushonga. There are no clean medicines in the clinics. Vana vavo marova. Rural youths are unemployed. Migwagwa hakuna iri kugadzirwa. Roads are in a terrible shape." This is Muchinguri, the defense minister, openly accepting that the rural infrastructure is dilapidated. Chinamasa answers, "But Ruku, we are busy kugadzira migwagwa. We are building and rehabilitating roads in urban areas. Good schools are in towns. Best health delivery is in cities. Saka we are busy kubata vanhu vachamisa zvakanaka, wedu zero. We are busy attracting Chamisa's supporters, but we are doing nothing for our supporters." That is Chamisa, Chinamasa saying that. Mugwadi responds, "Wechidiki vari kunew dispensation ndeyekugadzirira kuti mukomana atonge because hapana zvairi kuitira vanhu vekumaruwa. Young people say their new dispensation is to vote for Chamisa to be president. Right now, ZANU-PF is doing nothing for the rural people." That is Mugwadi, the director of information for ZANU, privately admitting in this leaked but unverified transcript. Mutsvangwa says, imi vanhu vekumaruzevha ndewedu, chero kusawaitira chinhu, they will vote for ZANU-PF. wakapusa hawaone better tomirira in urban areas ndimo mune vanhu vanoona saka tongovavhara chero pasi zviripo. Rural people are our supporters. They will vote for us even if we do not do anything for them. They are stupid. We should instead focus on urban people. They are more vigilant and will notice anything we do not do for them. Again, another dramatic admission by a top ZANU-PF official saying that ZANU-PF needs to campaign among the rural people, among the urban people, because rural people, as he says, are stupid and they will vote for ZANU whether ZANU has done anything for them or not. Chinamasa then says, my comrades, we are facing a very difficult and different political party. Chamisa wa manya neminda. Uye economy yedu yafa. Chamisa is now campaigning on land reform and our economy is dead. That is Chinamasa saying that, a former finance minister. And a reminder again, it was Chinamasa who opened officially a bin in Chitungwiza. Just to remind you, this conversation among Chinamasa, Mugwadi, Muchangwa, and Muchinguri, although not independently confirmed because there is no video or audio, reflects the dialogue going on among ZANU-PF party officials and the few members that are left in that party. Similar leaks have been published. They all show ZANU-PF officials are speaking fearfully that Musangano Wafa, the party, is dead. This is something they have been reluctant to say for many years. They know ZANU-PF died many years ago. But why are they speaking out now? The answer is simple. Because there is a rising national resentment against ZANU-PF. The economy is not performing well. The Zimbabwe dollar is in a coma. One economist predicted the Zimbabwe dollar will die this month, June. Inflation is rising like self-rising flour when baking bread. Unemployment is at an all-time high. And ZANU-PF knows very well what is happening and the consequences of a depreciating economy. Corruption is at an all-time high. Another top ZANU-PF official, Matema Danda, said Zimbabweans want to know, and they have a right to know, what happened to the 15 billion US dollars that disappeared. He was asked, how do you know it disappeared? He said Mugabe, the former president, said so himself in public. He said 15 billion US dollars disappeared. Chris Muchangwa, another top ZANU-PF official, asked exactly the same question. Where is the 15 billion US dollars that has disappeared? In another leaked conversation in ZANU-PF headquarters, again, one official is heard to say Mnangagwa is demanding that he be paid 20 million US dollars to allow a business to invest. This official then says, what kind of a president is that demanding this bribe? ZANU-PF yafa, yaora. ZANU-PF is rotten and is dead. Now, all of this is coming from top ZANU-PF officials themselves. They are openly or privately acknowledging the party is dead and the party is going to lose the 2023 elections. People are beginning to realize that the infrastructure is now breaking down because it was constructed during the Ian Smith regime some 42 years ago. ZANU-PF has not made any substantive investment in the infrastructure. Rural people are feeling the worst. A person in a rural area who died in 1950 and miraculously resurrected today would not be surprised by anything. That person will see the same roads, the same buildings, exactly the same as they were in 1950. It will for him be like he was waking up from a deep sleep. ZANU-PF is now facing an uncomfortable reality that the party has failed to uplift the country and the people. Almost 50% of the Zimbabwean population is living in extreme poverty. Yet 5 years ago, less than 40% of Zimbabweans were living in extreme poverty during the last year of the Mugabe regime in 2017. Zimbabweans living in rural areas are now joining their counterparts in urban areas in sharply and loudly telling ZANU-PF that the party has destroyed the nation. The Ngapinde Hake Mukomana mantra is resonating throughout the country. It is now the rallying point, the clarion call to remove Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF from government and install Chamisa and the Triple C. When Mutsvangwa reportedly said the rural people are stupid and they will vote for ZANU-PF even if they know the party has done nothing for them and has, as a matter of fact, abandoned them, he was reflecting the political and ideological mindset of ZANU-PF. The meeting in Uzumba Maramba Pfungwe between rural people and ZANU-PF officials was indicative of the fact that ZANU-PF cannot answer questions from people. They feel they are not accountable to the people but to their bosses. The sad reality is that ZANU-PF does not feel like it owes Zimbabweans anything. ZANU-PF ministers and officials came into government or their positions with one aim only: to enrich themselves. Former Finance Minister Simba Makoni recently said that self-aggrandizement or self-enrichment was the only motivational factor in serving in the government for ZANU-PF. He said under Ian Smith, government ministers drove their own cars to work, parked them in the garage, and only drove government cars for business. At that time, they drove the Peugeot 404s. And when they were done, they left the government vehicles at work and drove their own cars home. But when ZANU-PF took over as the government of Zimbabwe in 1980, the then Prime Minister Mugabe ordered that all ministers be supplied with Mercedes-Benz cars to use at work and at home. Later, the ministers proudly felt they could not drive their Mercedes-Benz cars to rural areas. White nzira dzakashata for our cars. So they were given more vehicles to travel to rural areas. This personal accumulation of wealth from state assets is the driving force for each ZANU-PF minister or official. When Mugabe in 2000 ordered the seizure of commercial farms by ZANU-PF militants, the expectation was that the farms would be distributed to the ordinary people, especially those in overcrowded rural areas. But the ZANU-PF supporters, the ones who seized those farms, were not able to settle on those farms. They were simply told the farms were for top government ministers and officials. And in some places, they were forcibly evacuated from those farms. Mugabe's project, which has been inherited by Mnangagwa, has historically been to wipe out by all means necessary any organized opposition to his rule. Barely 3 years after independence, Mugabe deployed the notorious 5th Brigade to Madebeleland because he wanted to, in the words of the late Innocent Nkala, neutralize ZAPU. More than 20,000 innocent civilians were killed by the 5th Brigade. In 2005, Mugabe created a humanitarian crisis when he ordered the destruction of homes in high-density areas. Known as Operation Murambatsvina, entire blocks of homes were bulldozed to the ground. According to the United Nations estimates, Operation Murambatsvina led to the loss of jobs for 700,000 people and affected a further 2.4 million people countrywide. According to analysts and NGOs, the real reason for Operation Murambatsvina was Mugabe wanted to wipe out rising support for the MDC led by Tsvangirai. In 2008, Mugabe launched a bloody assault on MDC-T led by Tsvangirai after figures showed Tsvangirai had won the general election of 2008. Estimates of up to 1,000 MDC supporters were killed by ZANU-PF thugs. And in 2018 elections, MDC-T supporters were gunned down in cold blood by trigger-happy soldiers. Following an international outrage, a commission of inquiry led by South African former President Monhlate made recommendations on avoiding politically motivated violence. None of the recommendations were implemented by the Mnangagwa regime. This pattern of ZANU-PF dictatorial rule and politically motivated violence has continued for 42 years. In the past, ZANU-PF enjoyed assaulting, abducting, kidnapping, torturing, or killing opposition supporters with impunity, without much of the response from the opposition supporters. But today, the situation has changed significantly. The demographic shift to a youthful Zimbabwe is now producing a new political environment that is driven by the youth agenda. Unlike many years in the past, more than 70% of Zimbabwe's population is under 40 years of age. People are now beginning to ask questions, both in the rural and urban areas. Why must we allow ZANU-PF to abduct, harass, torture, or kill us? What has ZANU-PF done to develop this country? Specifically, what has ZANU-PF done to improve the lives of rural people who form nearly 70% of the country's population? Must we, Zimbabweans, take this ZANU-PF impunity while lying down? What can we learn from Makomborero Zwinawashe's clarion call? Namely, we are who we have been waiting for. We are many, they are few. We must not let the devil run away with the Bible from the congregation. Only the Zimbabwean masses in both rural and urban areas have the answers to these national and historic questions.
This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of